Let me guess. If I say the words divorce listing, does it make your shoulders tense just a bit? We have all been there working with that divorcing homeowner, and we've all had one of those stories, right? But that reaction, that's not about skill. It's about pressure. So if I may, can I start with something direct? If a divorce listing closes, but the refinance fails 6 months later, was it actually a successful transaction? If one spouse keeps the home on paper but can't qualify to remove the other from the mortgage, did we really solve anything? Right? My name is Lynn Goss, and I've spent 3 decades in lending, and I specialize in one very narrow discipline: divorce mortgage strategy, where legal agreements meet the underwriting reality. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's this: divorce housing decisions are not driven by price or marketing or any negotiating skill. They are driven by pressure. And when that pressure changes, the drivers change. So today, I'm going to show you the 5 drivers that determine whether a divorce listing stabilizes or quietly unravels after you're gone. So let's ground this in your market for a moment, if we could. The Orlando metro area market alone, there are thousands of families each year that are navigating divorce with real property involved. That means they're making high stakes decisions about what? Whether to keep or sell their home, how they're going to divide their equity, where each person is going to live, where their children are going to go to school. These are not small decisions. Most are financially binding, emotionally charged, and often time compressed. And here's the reality: most of those families are not working with a realtor or a lender who understands the divorce layer of housing, not intentionally, just unknowingly. And that gap, it creates risk for the family. And it creates positioning opportunity, though, for the professional who does understand it. But let me be clear, not to chase divorce listings, but to handle them correctly when they arrive. So let's get into it a little bit. Divorce, it changes the pressure under which decisions are made. We know that. We take tools, however, that are designed for stable environments, and then we apply them inside of that instability. And then we're surprised when they misfire, right? Divorce doesn't make people irrational. It changes what they're protecting. And when that protection becomes the priority, logic stops leading the conversation. That is why timelines collapse, why agreements unravel, and why someone says yes in mediation only to say absolutely not 3 weeks later. This isn't a skills problem, my friends. It's a systems problem. And once you see the system, you will lead differently. I promise you. So let's break it down for you. In traditional real estate, we are trained to manage 5 categories: price, property, people, process, and profit. And those categories work, right? And why do they? Because they're clean and they're predictable and they're stable, most of all. That is, until divorce enters the room. Because divorce does not just change the people involved. It changes the pressure under which these decisions are being made. And when that pressure changes, every single thing underneath those 5 categories changes right along with it. It's where price is no longer just about price anymore. It becomes about meaning. And when that property is no longer just an asset or inventory, but rather it becomes attachment, right? People, they are no longer just participants, but they become very, very, very protective. And the process, well, when that stops being linear, it fractures into many different competing timelines. And last, but certainly not least, profit, well, that will only hold when there is alignment across all of it. And let me be very clear, these are not emotional side notes. These are structural forces, and they are operating in every single divorce housing decision, whether you and I see them or not. And if you or I can only see the surface categories, we will keep reacting to volatility instead of leading through it. This, my friends, this is the framework. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Now, let me show you just how each one of these changes when they come to life. Driver number one. There's a moment in every divorce housing when that number stops being a number. You as an agent, you can feel it. Maybe the tone tightens. Somebody's shifting in their chair. Maybe the air thickens slightly. But from the outside to you and I, it just looks like disagreement over price. But from the inside, from their perspective, that number now represents something else. It represents fairness and sacrifice. It represents power. I mean, it represents who wins and who loses. And once meaning attaches to a number, logic alone cannot resolve it, because you're no longer negotiating value. You're negotiating identity. And if you treat meaning like math, like a number, you will create resistance every single time. And remember, sometimes, just sometimes, it's not even the number that's the problem. It's what the house represents, right? That security and that history. I mean, it's the last place where everything felt stable, right? And if you or I miss that shift, we will misread the entire conversation. That's why in divorce real estate, price is not the driver, meaning is. So let's talk about driver number two, attachment. Because in traditional real estate, property is inventory, right? It's square footage, it's lot size and upgrades and comps. It's all of those things. But in divorce, guess what? Property is memory. It's where the babies came home from the hospital. It's where the grandkids and the family celebrated at the holidays, right? It's where they thought they were building a future, where they thought they were going to grow old with someone. So when that attachment is present and the house stops being a structure, it becomes proof. Proof that the marriage mattered. Proof that that sacrifice, the years of that, meant something. Proof that you're not the only one losing. So when someone says, I'm not leaving this house, they may not be talking about the ground or countertops. They may be defending stability or dignity or the last piece of control they feel they still have. So if you or I approach attachment like an asset or inventory, we're going to try to solve it with staging or pricing or better logic because we feel like they're attacking our professionalism, right? But attachment isn't solved. It's acknowledged. And when it's acknowledged, the temperature drops. When it's ignored, oh man, that resistance, it just hardens. And that's why in divorce real estate, property is not the driver. Attachment is. So let's go into driver number three, protective behavior. In traditional real estate, you guys know, people are participants in a transaction. But in divorce, people are protecting something, right? What are they protecting? They're protecting that equity. They're protecting leverage. They're protecting time, their children, themselves, right? And protection, it changes their behavior. And what I don't want us to do is interpret silence as disengagement. It's actually defense. I don't want us to interpret overpricing or pricing issues. That isn't strategy, it's leverage, right? Refusing to sign, that's not being irrational, that's control. So when someone feels financially or emotionally unsafe, they don't optimize, they fortify. And we all know fortified people do not negotiate the same way that stable sellers do. So if we misread protection as personality, you're going to react, right? If you recognize it as pressure, you'll be able to stabilize it. That's the shift. People aren't the driver. Protective behavior is. So let's go into our fourth competing driver. In traditional real estate, there's only one timeline. We list, you market, you negotiate, and you close. It's pretty simple and it's so easy to manage for the most part. However, when it comes to divorce, there are multiple timelines running all on the same timeline. All in the same time, I should say. That's the legal timeline, the emotional timeline, the lending timeline, the real estate timeline. And they are rarely, if ever, aligned. And why is that? Well, because court dates, they don't care about rate locks. And those rate locks, they don't care about mediation delays or anything like that. Because emotional readiness, it doesn't care about your listing strategy. So what happens in this situation? Pressure builds, right? That's when we start seeing deadlines collide. Maybe one spouse wants urgency behind the sale, and the other one is quietly trying to delay it. And suddenly, this transaction feels chaotic. Not because anyone is incompetent, but because we're trying to move as one timeline inside of 4 competing timelines. And if you don't identify which timeline is actually driving that decision, you will promise stability you can't control, and that ability erodes. So in divorce real estate, process is not the driver. Competing timelines are. And that brings us to our fifth and final driver, alignment. Because in traditional real estate, profit is generally the outcome, right? Net proceeds, commissions, equity distribution. But again, in divorce, profit is rarely the real goal. Alignment is. Alignment between what's legally agreed to, what lending will actually approve, what the market will realistically support, and what the parties are emotionally prepared to execute. And if those pieces aren't aligned, the deal may close, but the outcomes will never, ever hold. A refinance clause that doesn't qualify, a buyout that can't be funded, a sale ordered before feasibility is verified. That is not alignment, my friends. That is hope. And we all know that what? You can say it with me if we were all together, right? Hope is not a strategy. In divorce real estate, profit is not the driver. Alignment is. But when housing decisions align across legal, lending, and market reality, settlements hold. But when they don't, someone pays for it later. So let's take a look at the 5 drivers at work. What you've just seen is not a new tactic. It's just a new lens. Because on the left are the categories you were trained to manage, right? We've talked about them. Price, property, people, process, and profit. And those aren't wrong. But I just need you to understand when divorce pressure is present, those are just no longer sufficient. Because beneath each one is a force that actually governs behavior. The meaning, the attachment, the protective behavior, the competing timelines, and the alignment, right? We talked about that. These aren't emotional side notes. They're structural drivers. And when you only see the left side, you manage transactions. But if you can open your eyes and you can see what's on the right side, you stabilize outcomes. Your skill doesn't change, your awareness does. And that awareness is the difference between reacting to divorce listings and leading them. Listen, divorce real estate will never feel like traditional real estate. And it shouldn't at all. Because the stakes, they are so different. The pressure is so different. And the impact, it lasts long after the closing day. But here's the good news. You don't need to become a therapist. You don't need to become a lawyer. You don't need to become a lender. You simply need to see what's actually driving the decision. Because when you do, divorce listings, they are not something to avoid. They are something to handle differently. And the agents who learn to see these drivers, they don't just close transactions. They become the steady professional that every single one in the room trusts. And I don't know about you, but that's the room I want to be in. So will you please join Scott, Lonnie, and myself inside of the Ocala room for these and many more upcoming sessions, all sponsored by your local title company. Again, my name is Lynn Goss. It's been a pleasure chatting with you today. And if you want to go deeper in how to apply this in real time, it's exactly what we do and more inside of the Ocala room. It's not just networking. It's not just education. It is a curated environment where real estate and mortgage leaders sharpen strategy, and we strengthen collaboration, and we build the kind of skill that holds under pressure. The Ocala room is where we take this from awareness to application. You'll see the website for the Ocala room on the right and my contact information on the left. It's been a pleasure speaking with you today. Thank you.